The nurse who challenged trans NHS doctor threatened with sack after misgendering. This case is completely mental. Alright everyone, here's another fucking mental story where once again ideology and reality are clashing. Today we've got Sandy Peggy's fight against NHS FIFE and Dr. Beth Upton, a man claiming to be a woman who is persecuting Sandy Peggy for having the gall to have her own eyes and to use them to notice that this man is not a woman, he's just a man. This ain't just any old legal case. This is massive. Sandy Peggy is a nurse with over 3 decades of experience and service who finds herself in the centre of a legal battle from a changing room dispute. What's her crime, I hear you ask? Voicing her discomfort when a man, Dr. Beth Upton, was using the women's changing room at Victoria Hospital in Kirkcaldy. But this ain't even just about discomfort, it's about the violation of women's spaces, even in professional settings such as work. Nurse Sandy Peggy has had the courage to speak up to a scene that would make most women feel uncomfortable. A man pretending to be a woman in her changing rooms. As usual, like we always see in these cases, she's been punished. Punished for protecting her privacy, punished for wanting a space where she can feel safe. So this ain't just about NHS policy, it's about stripping away what it means to be a woman and whether or not you have the right to dignity and privacy when you are getting changed at work. So think about this. Every woman watching, this could be you. This is about your safety, it's about your comfort, and all of that is being traded for an ideology just as long as people who support the ideology can claim inclusivity at your expense. So she's fighting for her rights under the Equality Act 2010, defending the sanctity of female-only spaces. Amazing. So Sandy Peggy went to court against her employer, NHS FIFE, and a male doctor who claimed to be a woman. That's who is known as Dr. Beth Upton. The issue started when Nurse Peggy objected to sharing a female changing room with Dr. Upton, who is a man pretending to be a woman. Unfortunately, the hospital's policy allowed Dr. Upton to use the female facilities, so an investigation began after Dr. Upton reported her for bullying. Nurse Sandy Peggy is a woman who has worked as a nurse for 30 years. She's got no track record of any trouble whatsoever that I've been made aware of. Is now being accused of committing misconduct because she challenged the presence of a male doctor, Dr. Beth Upton, in the female changing rooms at work. Dr. Beth Upton is a man who claims to identify as a woman. I don't know what identify as a woman means. That's not a real thing. You either are a woman or you're not. And you can't be a woman if you're a man. So, Nurse Sandy Peggy encountered Dr. Upton, who is a man, in the female hospital changing room 3 times before Christmas. On the 3rd occasion, Nurse Sandy Peggy was in a situation where she urgently needed to use the changing room due to heavy menstrual bleeding and felt uncomfortable with Dr. Upton's presence. And I don't blame her at all because he's a man. So Nurse Sandy Peggy made her discomfort known by talking about it. Nurse Sandy Peggy admitted to calling Mr. Upton a male, because he is a man, but she denies being aggressive or confrontational about it. Dr. Upton claims that Nurse Sandy Peggy harassed him by making transphobic remarks, like saying he's a man in the female changing room. I don't think for 1 second she was aggressive or confrontational, and even if she was, he ain't scared of her. He's massive and she's tiny. The NHS FIFE is trying to dismiss her, even though she's been working there for 30 years, because she defended single-sex spaces after a male who is a doctor and a higher-up colleague, which matters, was using the female changing rooms. Sandy Peggy's claim hinges on the right to privacy and dignity in single-sex facilities, a right ostensibly protected by the Equality Act 2010 and workplace regulation from 1992. So her argument is straightforward. Sharing a changing room with a biological male, regardless of gender identity, violates her right to a safe and private environment. But the counter-argument from the NHS FIFE and Dr. Upton, the man, revolves around the interpretation of the Equality Act that includes protections based on gender reassignment, whatever that means, because they don't really define it. Okay, just like gender identity, nobody really knows what it means, just like trans. But this gender reassignment protection allows trans individuals to use facilities aligned with their gender identity. Again, nobody really knows what that is either. So they argue that Sandy Peggy's actions constituted harassment towards Dr. Upton, the man, because she was misgendering him, which his team claims created a hostile work environment. Do you know what creates a hostile work environment? Being a man that's using the women's changing rooms and toilets against the wishes of the women there. It's mental that we're here with the hospitals, a hospital where everybody should know what a woman is. But here's where the conflict arises. The Equality Act doesn't explicitly outline how these protections interact when they clash. Nurse Sandy Peggy's case actually brings to light a critical question. Can the so-called gender reassignment, which basically covers everything from a man simply declaring himself to be identifying as a woman to a man chopping his peen off, can that override the rights to sex-based privacy, the right for women to have spaces away from men such as toilets and changing rooms? Sandy Peggy's legal team argues no, especially when women's safety and dignity are at stake. I don't even know why gender identity is even written into any of our legal language whatsoever, since it doesn't really have a bloody definition. Same as trans and same as gender reassignment. What even is gender reassignment? It's cosmetic surgery. It's chopping your peen off. It's shaving your jaw. It's getting laser hair surgery. There's no real coherent definition of what you become off the back of that needs to be defined in law. This is purely a matter of belief. So you could say, does the women's right to a changing room or toilet override the right of somebody's religious belief? Yeah, it does, in my opinion. This situation is considered extraordinary because the lawyer representing NHS, FIFE and Dr. Upton accused nurse Sandy Peggy of harassment in public tribunal proceeding before internal investigation was finished, which could bias the investigation. What's also bad is that in the middle of the tribunal, they were going to pull her in for disciplinary, even though she's not allowed to discuss it. It's not surprising to me that as a result of this, the NHS is facing more legal action from nurse Sandy Peggy. This just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. It's like they don't even realise they can't get away with this. But then again, in my opinion, trans believers and trans activists think they're above the law anyway, because deciding the outcome of a disciplinary process before it's even finished is actually quite shocking. Basically, you're guilty and we don't even need to prove it. We've just decided you're guilty. So what all of this means is that the NHS FIFE prejudged an ongoing disciplinary process. This means they made a decision or took a position before the full legal process was completed. But we all know how trans activists and woke activists operate. You are guilty and there is never an opportunity to prove yourself innocent because we've decided you're guilty and that's that. It undermines trust in the process, which is going to be why she's taking legal action. And it's going to be why many of us are watching this and thinking, how can we even trust the courts to do the right thing if nobody's going to hear us out and we've been decided guilty by our accusers? Miss Peggy's lawyer, Margaret Gribben, has now started new legal action against NHS FIFE because of how they've handled the situation. So there's evidence from a witness that contradicts Dr. Upton's account of a patient safety incident, but this hasn't stopped the health board from considering severe disciplinary actions against nurse Sandy Peggy. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm going to explain this. Basically, what's happened is, in the middle of a legal case, they're trying to do extra disciplinary proceeding against a female nurse, and therefore they're just shooting themselves in the foot. Maybe they realised that they might not get away with this court case, so they've decided to throw a few extra accusations and disciplinary motions in. Again, not a surprise to me that people are already considering what to punish her with before they've even found out whether she's guilty or not. They're just bloodthirsty animals at this point. So the investigation wants to add a charge of misgendering against nurse Sandy Peggy because she allegedly referred to Dr. Upton as a man during the investigation. Absolutely ridiculous, because he is a man. How are we at a point where in society a man can drag a woman to court for calling him a man? Dr. Upton is backed by the mad woke policies of NHS FIFE, so complaints about being misgendered has actually led to Sandy's suspension. Misgendered, what does that even actually mean when you're dealing with biological fact? The narrative today isn't about the truth. It's about feelings, and it's about bending over backwards to affirm other people's feelings, you know, the special people, the people who are apparently better than all of us. But what's mental about this is that so-called misgendering isn't even actually a crime, although the Labour Party have been bragging for years and years and years about wanting to make it a real criminal offence. Misgendering is quite literally calling a man or a woman. What these people are accusing nurse Sandy Peggy of doing is not playing along with Dr. Upton's demands to satisfy his weirdo fetish. And that should never, ever be considered a crime. Not in a million years. It's not a crime to refuse to participate in a man's fetish. Dr. Upton is a man. Dr. Upton is a man. Dr. Upton is a man. Arrest me, I don't care. He's a man. Born male, and he'll die male because he's a man. Sandy Peggy is being accused of misgendering Dr. Upton, who's a great big old man, but she misgendered him because she used male pronouns when speaking to her other colleagues in the NHS, which is another thing that's amazing, because you notice how even saying he's a man when he's not around is seen as some sort of crime. This case isn't isolated. In my opinion, this is part of a larger trend where women are told to shut up and accept men in their private spaces because it offends and hurts the feelings of the special people. Yeah, that's where we really are. Even if you're a nurse or a doctor, which, by the way, your entire job revolves around you knowing what a man and a woman is, you can't acknowledge it. In this case, what else was said in the changing room has been disputed by nurse Sandy Peggy. She accepts that she called Dr. Upton a male, because he is a male, he's a man, but she denies the claims of cornering or haranguing him. And he's a much physically larger person than she is. I looked up in a dictionary because I've never heard harangue before, and it actually means someone who means to give them a lengthy or aggressive speech. I absolutely love that this went from she called a man to she also bullied him in literally a nanosecond. This always happens when the accuser realises that people might not think calling a man would be enough grounds or justification to ruin somebody else's life. So then the accuser goes into making more accusations, like better ones.
Okay, well, she called me a man.
And everybody goes, so you are a man. And then he goes,
well, she bullied me as well, and she's scary, and she harangued me. She cornered me and said words to me.
This also happened in Maya Forstater's case. She took her employment to tribunal for similar reasons, and she won her case, which actually changed the law to create better protections in employment for people who don't believe in trans ideology. Because, you know, we actually needed a law to protect our rights to not believe in this absolute shit. Alongside the accusation of being a non-believer, she was then accused of bullying people in the workplace, which is absolutely hilarious. If you've ever met Maya Forstater, and I've met her a few times, and no offence to you whatsoever, Maya Forstater, not that you've got time to watch this, but no offence to her whatsoever, I don't think she could knock out a feather. Just saying, not that I could either, but I'm just saying. She's the nicest. She really is. She's just as sweet person, a really sweet person. And these men always play the victim and pretend they're scared for their lives. And they're just these traumatized, like dainty little women, which is part of the fantasy. So don't get it twisted. They're getting off on that. They're touching their willy to that. This idea that they're just a dainty little traumatized woman. And they're always having a go at the actual nicest women you could ever meet. And they're always pretending that they're like scared and intimidated by some of the most soft-spoken, politest, kindest women. These men that have a fetish for pretending to be a woman. And don't be fooled, because this does include having a fetish for pretending to be a scared and traumatized woman. And for me personally, I see this as sadistic and narcissistic, and they get a lot of pleasure, especially sexual pleasure, out of torturing, harassing and bullying, and ultimately punishing women with the law. Definitely get off on it. And having the law and having the police and having these institutions behind them is a massive power trip. It's absolutely disgusting, it's disturbing, and it's really worrying that so many people can't see this for exactly what it is. Surprisingly, Nurse Sandy Peggy was also accused of compromising patient safety by refusing to work effectively with Dr. Upton. I can only imagine this means that she was refusing to pretend that he's a woman on the job. Like, honestly, how is it even relevant or important to participate in this man's fetish at work so that he can have a boner while he's doing his job? It's not a priority. It shouldn't be a thing. The fact that she even is in this position where she's having to defend herself from this, I mean, that's my assumption. My assumption is that she didn't participate in the fetish, and that's why he's accusing her of this. Nurse Sandy's legal team has accused Dr. Upton of fabricating the two occasions in which she is accused of jeopardising patients' safety, which were not made till months after they were said to have occurred. Nurse Sandy Peggy insists that these incidents did not happen. And you know what? I believe her. I'm not afraid to say that I've never met someone who claimed to be the opposite sex and tells the truth. Nurse Sandy Peggy is believed to have been told by the NHS FIFE on the second day of her employment tribunal that potential outcomes from Friday's hearing include sanctions up to and including dismissal from her job. How insane is that? I mean, imagine it. Really, really, really imagine it. So yeah, it totally makes sense that you can lose your job for not pretending that a male doctor is a woman. Even if you work in a hospital where everyone's job relies on knowing what a man and a woman is. Listen, I totally believe Nurse Sandy Peggy. I've seen how people react to a man claiming to be a woman in real life, and everyone, I mean literally everyone, normally tiptoes around him because they know these men are not known for their stability or their tolerance or their timid behaviour. They're known to get aggressive and confrontational.
I told her, excuse me, it's ma'am. It is ma'am. I need your corporate number because I'm going to call them and talk about how I was misgendered several times in this store.
Sandy Peggy's team is basically arguing that Dr. Upton's complaints and accusations are retaliation and an attempt to destroy her career because she is dared to challenge a man pretending to be a woman. And this sounds familiar to me because destroying someone's livelihood, making sure they lose their job, destroying their reputation, going after their career is actually always a trans activist first port of call to anyone who even dares to question them. It's completely textbook. I believe her because these men and trans believers always do this. This is honestly nothing more than sadistic bullying. These narcs will stalk and harass you. They will be disgusting. They'll even perv over you. They'll threaten you and make your life hell and then cry to everyone that they are a victim of you. It's really twisted. Sandy Peggy is not the only woman who's at the receiving end of a man who claims to be a woman and has a fixation on punishing her for not going along with it. I absolutely 100% believe that this is punishment for her not pandering to his horrible porn-addled fetish. It's disgusting. He's on a narc rage, and narc rages, in my experience, can last years. In my opinion, these people are dangerous. Here's another mental thing that happened during this court case though. A judge ruled that Nurse Sandy Peggy is allowed to call a male he in the trial. This is a really small little victory in a twisted narrative where reality is once again up for debate in a court of law. And we've not actually seen this in court cases before, as far as I'm aware. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I remember years ago when Maria McLachlan was punched in the face by a 20-year-old boxer who identified as a woman. It was recorded on video and it was published on YouTube. And I remember she took him to court for it, and the judge ordered her to refer to him as a woman. And when she refused to say that she was assaulted by a woman, she lost a case over it, which is perjury, by the way. It's perjury. She refused to perjure herself and lie on the stand in court. Now, I don't know if in England we do it under oath like in all the American films. Maybe we do. She refused to lie in court under oath and lost her case over it. Over a mental religious porn idea that women should call men she and her after they've assaulted the woman so that they can get sexual gratification from it. This madness somehow made its way into the courts, and women are being forced to refer to these men as women on the stand. So it's good. It's good that a judge has decided to let her tell the truth in a court case and say that a man is actually a man. But let's cut through the fog of absurdity here. Nurse Sandy Peggy isn't just fighting for a job. She's fighting for every woman's right to feel safe, even while at work. Her case could set a precedent, a line in the sand where either truth or this new dogma will prevail. Will we allow our legal system to punish those who speak biological facts? How many more times must the lives of girls and women be ruined because she dares to say no to a man or to a narcissist? Let's be honest, because women can be involved in this too and try and make you go along with it too, but it's usually men. So this tribunal has been adjourned until July, leaving Nurse Sandy and all of us in limbo for now, with her career hanging on by a thread. This isn't just about one nurse, it's about whether or not society will continue down this path of madness, or if these cases will eventually force her to return to sanity. She's had loads and loads of public support, but is any of it going to be enough to go against the might of this institutional woke stupidity? Nurse Sandy Peggy might lose her job over this. Why? Because she refused to play along with this Orwellian nightmare where words mean whatever activists want them to mean. In this upside down world, stating that a man is now the equivalent of hate speech. Nurse Sandy Peggy's legal battle isn't just hers, it's ours. Will we as a society continue to be silent as the truth is legally redefined without even so much as a vote for many of us? Since we've got to wait till July, what's the takeaway? I think it's time for a reality check. Biological sex is immutable. Women deserve spaces free from men. Nurse Sandy Peggy didn't ask for this fight, but she's standing up for all of us who believe in truth over tyranny. If this tribunal rules against her in July, it's not just Sandy losing, it's all of her. Because if we can't defend even the most basic of truths, what else are we going to be willing to surrender?
Early in the morning, as the sun comes up, I just wanna have a cup. There's one drink, that's the one for me. Won't you please make me a cup of tea?
Root beer.